Welcome back to the Motivated Mind Zone. Glad to have you here. Today, we are doing a really interesting deep dive. We're focusing on an area most of us just, well, ignore our feet and lower legs.
Right. We just use them to get around.
Exactly. But the sources you've brought today suggest something pretty extraordinary, that these parts, the furthest points from our core, actually act as like early warning signs.
Visible signs, yeah.
Visible signs for big health issues, specifically pointing towards the liver. So for you listening, if you want to get those quick insights, understand the why behind things, this looks really useful. It seems to offer some clear, memorable clues.
That's the idea.
Our mission today is really to pull apart why these symptoms show up there. Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay, but hang on. Before we even look at the first clue, we absolutely have to be clear about what the source material stresses.
Right, the disclaimer. Always important.
Crucial context here.
Well,
What we're talking about are indicators. They're clues, signs of a potential problem, maybe a systemic imbalance.
so not a diagnosis.
Absolutely not. There are signals your body might be struggling, but under no circumstances is this a formal medical diagnosis. The source is really clear. You need proper testing. You need to see a doctor to confirm anything like liver disease.
Got it. Potential clues, not definitive answers.
But the core idea still holds. The way your lower legs and feet look, it can actually give you a surprising amount of pretty sophisticated information about what might be going on inside, health-wise.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. The why. Why the feet? If the liver, a core organ, is the source of the trouble, why do we see signs way down there first? It almost feels like a plumbing issue.
It really comes down to physiology and, well, simple distance. Think about your vascular system.
Yeah.
It's a huge network of pipes,
Yeah,
right?
arteries, veins.
And the heart's the pump. It has to generate enough pressure to push blood all the way down to your toes. And then it's relying on the veins, these tiny valves, muscle pumps in your legs, to get all that fluid back up again, against gravity.
That's a long trip. And uphill on the way back.
It's a massive amount of work. So it just makes sense physiologically that if there's any compromise in this system, maybe the pressure isn't great, maybe the blood quality is off because the liver isn't filtering well.
The furthest points feel it first, like the end of the garden hose effect. Low pressure out there.
Exactly that. When something's wrong, poor circulation, inflammation may be coming from a stressed liver, even heart issues. That problem shows up first, where the journey is already the toughest.
The feet and lower legs.
Farthest from the heart. Their circulation is the most vulnerable, the slowest. Any problem involving blood vessels or fluid management, it's going to show up down there, probably long before you notice anything in your chest or abdomen.
So the foot is kind of like the litmus test for the whole circulatory system's efficiency.
It's the canary in the coal mine, absolutely. And, we see this exact same principle, this distal vulnerability, in other conditions, too. It helps us understand the pattern.
The source mentioned a parallel with a really common condition.
It did. It draws a line straight to things like diabetes, the nerve problems, the circulation issues you see with diabetes. They almost always show up first or most severely in the hands and feet.
The fingers and toes.
The distal points, exactly. It's the same concept. Those tiny peripheral nerves and the smallest blood vessels, the capillaries, out at the very ends, they're the first ones to get damaged or stop working right when your overall systemic health is struggling. Understanding that basic idea distance equals vulnerability is key to seeing why these foot signs are so significant.
Okay, so we get the why, distance, vulnerability. Now let's look at the what. What are the specific visual things down there that might signal circulation compromise? The source starts with discoloration, these red and brown dots or specks on the lower leg.
Yeah, these little specks are really interesting clues. The source describes them as sometimes looking shiny. They can be different sizes, small or larger, and you usually see them clustered around the shins, maybe the lower calves.
And what does that mean physiologically?
Well, the immediate read is just poor circulation,
Hmm.
but quite localized and often severe right there. It's basically a sign that the tiny blood vessels, the capillaries, might be damaged, or maybe blood components are kind of leaking out because the vessel walls aren't strong enough.
Okay, poor circulation. But that could be lots of things. How does the source tie these dots specifically back to the liver? What's the proposed connection?
This is where you have to think about the liver's main job, filtering. It's the body's master filter.
Right.
So if the liver is struggling, if it's not doing its job properly, waste products or maybe toxins that should be getting neutralized and removed, they just keep circulating in the blood.
Ah, so they're irritating the system.
Exactly. These circulating irritants can cause inflammation. They can directly damage the delicate walls of those tiny blood vessels, especially the ones furthest away, the ones already under stress.
So while, yes, it could be diabetes or something else, the sources are saying these dots are often seen when the liver isn't filtering the blood properly, and that dirty blood is damaging the endpoint capillaries.
That's the connection they draw. It's a sign of systemic toxicity hitting the most vulnerable vessels.
Okay, that makes sense. But the next vascular clue, this one sounds even more specific. Spider veins, or the source calls it spider novus. And this is linked strongly to cirrhosis.
Yes, and this is where it shifts from just general circulation problems to something hormonal.
Yep.
And honestly, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Spider veins, those little web-like patterns, and even the bigger, bulging varicose veins you see in the lower legs. The source links them very strongly to advanced liver disease, particularly cirrhosis.
Wait, hold on. Varicose veins. I always thought that was mostly about, standing too much, genetics, maybe weak valves in the veins, letting blood pool, like a mechanical issue?
That's the common understanding, yes.
But you're saying the source suggests we should be thinking hormones first, caused by the liver. That kind of flicks the script on that.
It absolutely challenges that common assumption. Because the root mechanism described here isn't just about gravity and valves wearing out. It's about hormonal dysfunction caused by the liver not doing its metabolic job properly.
How so?
Okay, so a healthy liver is crucial for metabolizing hormones, breaking them down, filtering out any excess,
Hmm.
including estrogen.
Right.
Now, when the liver tissue gets damaged, like in cirrhosis, its ability to process and detoxify these hormones tanks. It gets severely impaired.
So hormones build up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You end up with way too much estrogen circulating in the bloodstream. The technical term is hyperestrogenemia, and this excess estrogen directly impacts the blood vessels.
How, wow. What does estrogen do to veins?
High levels of estrogen cause vasodilation. It makes blood vessels widen. It specifically affects the smooth muscle lining the vessels, causing them to relax and become, well, less structurally sound over time. So this ongoing relaxation and widening, driven by estrogen, the liver should have cleared out. That's what the source proposes. Leads directly to those spider veins and varicose veins showing up, especially down in the legs where the blood pressure from gravity is already highest.
Wow. So it's not just bad plumbing visually, it's a signal flag saying the body's hormone clearance system is failing, and that failure is physically changing the blood vessels down in your legs and feet. That's a really clear internal problem showing up externally.
Exactly. Now let's shift from the vessels to the skin itself. Specifically, let's talk about cracked heels.
Yeah.
Persistently dry, sometimes painfully cracked heels.
Oh, yeah. Everyone assumes that's just dry skin, right? Or maybe friction from shoes. Grab the heavy moisturizer.
That's the usual approach. But our sources link this directly to a potential nutrient absorption failure, a much deeper issue.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, the sources identify cracked heels as typically signaling a deficiency in certain key nutrients. Primarily, they mention vitamin B3, also known as niacin, or potentially omega-3 fatty acids.
Right, both important for skin. But where's the liver connection?
It comes down to one of the liver's most critical outputs, bile.
Ah, the stuff that helps digest fat. like detergent for fats.
Precisely. The liver makes bile, it gets stored in the gallbladder, then released into the small intestine when you eat fat. Bile's job is to emulsify fats, break them down into tiny droplets so your gut can actually absorb them.
Okay.
So if your liver isn't producing enough bile, or maybe the bile isn't flowing properly, then your body simply cannot effectively absorb those crucial fat-soluble nutrients.
So even if I'm eating plenty of fish oil for omega-3s or foods rich in B3, if my liver isn't making enough good bile, those nutrients basically just pass right through me.
That's the mechanism proposed. They don't get absorbed. And the cracked heel is the visible outcome of that malabsorption because omega-3s and other fat-soluble vitamins like A and E are absolutely vital for maintaining your skin's barrier function, its integrity, its moisture.
If you can't absorb them because of poor bile, the skin suffers. Dryness, cracking,
Yeah.
especially in high-stress areas like the heels.
Exactly. And the sources specifically mention that a severe deficiency in vitamin B3 has a name, pellagra.
Pellagra. I've heard of that, but what is it exactly? Remind us.
Pellagra is historically a pretty serious disease caused by severe niacin deficiency.
Mm.
It's famous for the 3Ds, dermatitis, major skin problems, diarrhea, and dementia. The skin issues can be really traumatic, which just underscores how critical B vitamins are for healthy skin.
And other B vitamins play a role too.
Yes, more generally, other B vitamins often act as cofactors. That means they're like helper molecules that allow the liver's enzymes to work properly, especially enzymes involved in metabolizing proteins and just overall cellular health and repair. So skin integrity relies heavily on having enough of these B vitamin cofactors and being able to absorb those fat-soluble vitamins.
So that cracked heel isn't just a local issue. It's potentially a direct sign that the liver isn't supporting nutrient absorption through proper bile production. Okay. What about other foot discomforts? The source mentioned itching and pain.
Yes, itchy feet. Specifically, the source describes this as often being quite severe itching, usually on the bottom of the foot, the sole.
Okay, what's that about?
It's described as a sign of a congested liver. The idea relates to something called cholestasis, where bile flow from the liver slows down or gets blocked, things back up.
Fluids backing up in the liver itself.
Potentially bile, maybe other fluids. This backup can lead to an increase in circulating bile salts in the blood and also, critically, a buildup of histamines systemically.
Histamine, like in allergic reactions. That makes sense for itching.
Exactly. The liver is so backed up, so congested, that these waste products or signaling molecules are basically irritating the system right down to the nerve endings in the feet, causing that itching.
Wow. So that itch isn't necessarily an allergy. It could be the body reacting to its own internal congestion.
That's the interpretation given. And then there's foot pain. Lots of people get chronic foot pain, maybe heel pain, arch pain, and they immediately think, oh, it must be bone spurs or the classic one, plantar fasciitis.
Yeah, that's the go-to diagnosis for heel pain.
It really is. But the source material suggests, maybe not always, maybe we need another hypothesis sometimes.
Which is?
That sometimes this chronic foot pain or inflammation isn't actually structural at all. It might simply be rooted in a systemic liver problem.
How would that work?
Well, think back to the filtering job. If the liver's congested, overwhelmed, it's not efficiently filtering out inflammatory compounds from the blood. This can lead to a state of low-grade, chronic systemic inflammation throughout the body.
And the feet feel it most?
Well, being the furthest point, having perhaps the weakest circulation already, the feet are often where this systemic inflammatory gunk, so to speak, settles and causes persistent pain. It can feel just like plantar fasciitis, but the root cause isn't the foot itself, it's the overwhelmed liver.
That's a really different way to think about recurring foot pain. If it's inflammatory and coming from elsewhere, just treating the foot with stretches or orthotics might only be a Band-Aid?
It might miss the underlying issue completely.
Okay, and there were two other sort of general symptoms mentioned too. Hot feet and bad odor.
Yes, hot feet. identified quite specifically in the source as another symptom you might see with a bad liver. Again, probably linked to that circulatory stress, maybe the inflammation we just talked about.
And the bad odor. Smelly feet. Beyond the usual, I assume.
Yes, beyond just, sweaty socks. This points directly back to that core function, detoxification. The liver is the body's main detox center.
If it's failing, the garbage piles up.
That's exactly the analogy. If the liver isn't detoxifying correctly, metabolic waste products, toxins, they start to back up in the system. And when the primary exits, the liver processing things for the kidneys or bowels to remove are overwhelmed.
The body finds other ways out?
It has to.
Yep.
Starts using secondary pathways like the skin and even the breath to try and push out that accumulated garbage. So that unusual strong foot odor could actually be waste products being excreted through the pores in your feet.
Goodness. And this really brings us back to that key point the sources kept making about everything being connected, right? You can't just look at the liver alone.
It's probably the single most important concept here. The sources emphasize very clearly that if you have a terrible, unhealthy, bad liver, it's almost certain that your kidneys and your large intestine are also congested and struggling.
Wait, at work as a team.
A metabolic team, exactly.
Yeah.
If the main filter, the liver, is clogged, the secondary filters, the kidneys, immediately come under more stress, and the main waste disposal route, the colon, also gets backed up or functions poorly. They're all interconnected. That bad odor is just one sign that the entire system might be choked up.
Okay, moving on. The next set of clues seems to involve how the body handles fluids, starting with a really specific physical sign, pitting edema.
Ah, yes, pitting edema. This is a classic, very visible sign of fluid imbalance, suggesting there's too much fluid collecting outside of the blood vessels in the tissues, especially in the lower legs.
And there's a simple test for it.
Very simple, unmistakable. You just press your finger firmly into the skin, usually over the shin bone or ankle, hold it for a few seconds, and then release. If it leaves a clear indentation, a pit that just stays there, doesn't spring back quickly, that's pitting edema. It signifies significant fluid backup.
So what's the liver connection here? Why would a liver problem cause fluid to pool in the legs like that?
It often relates to protein production. In cases of more severe liver compromise, the liver can fail to produce enough of a really important protein called albumin.
Albumin. Okay, what does that do?
Albumin is crucial for maintaining what's called oncotic pressure in your blood. Basically, it acts like a sponge, helping to keep fluid inside the blood vessels.
Ah, so if albumin levels drop because the liver isn't making enough.
Fluid starts to leak out of the capillaries and into the surrounding tissues, the interstitial space. And because of gravity, this excess fluid tends to accumulate most noticeably in the lower legs and ankles. So the sources point to this fluid retention, this edema, as a very common symptom when the liver is significantly struggling.
Okay, that makes sense from a fluid dynamics perspective. Now let's shift to something that seems quite different. Microbial imbalances. Specifically, toenail fungus. How on earth does a problem with an internal organ like the liver lead to fungus growing on your toenails? That feels like a big jump.
It does seem like a leap, but it connects to this really important concept in more holistic health models.
Oh,
The gut-skin axis, or maybe even the gut-liver-skin axis.
yeah.
The observation from the source material is that people who have liver problems tend to show a higher level of fungal and yeast growth overall on their bodies.
Why would that be?
The liver's health, or lack thereof, profoundly impacts the entire internal environment, especially the balance of microbes in your gut microflora.
So a struggling liver messes up the gut bacteria balance, leads to dysbiosis.
Precisely. The internal environment gets disrupted, it becomes less healthy, maybe more inflammatory, maybe the pH shifts, and this allows less beneficial microbes, like certain yeasts and fungi, to overgrow inside the gut.
Okay, internal overgrowth. How does that get to the toenails?
That internal imbalance, that overgrowth of fungus and yeast in the gut, then often manifests externally. It's like the internal problem spills over. You might see it as toenail fungus, maybe athlete's foot, maybe fungal rashes on the skin.
So the fungus isn't just bad luck or poor hygiene.
It's seen as an opportunistic infection thriving because the internal terrain, influenced by the struggling liver and unbalanced gut, is allowing it to grow. So just putting antifungal cream on your toes might kill the fungus there, but it doesn't address the root cause, the systemic imbalance potentially originating from liver stress.
And the sources mentioned this connects to other common skin issues too.
Yes, exactly. The same underlying mechanism, this idea of systemic inflammation, microbial imbalance in the gut, all linked back to liver stress, is also implicated in conditions like persistent dandruff or even psoriasis flares.
Wow. So looking at toenail fungus, in this context, it's not just a nail problem. It's potentially a window into a much deeper internal microbial imbalance.
That's the perspective offered. It's an external symptom of internal disharmony.
Okay. And the final visual clue mentioned was about the nail itself, the white nail bed.
Yes, this one is purely about circulation again.
Mm.
The source describes the nail bed, you can see this on fingernails or toenails, becoming noticeably white, pale.
Mm.
And very often, that little pale half-moon shape at the base of the nail,
And the lunula.
that's it, the lunula, it often gets smaller or might disappear completely.
And why does poor circulation make the nail bed white? And what about the disappearing moon?
The whiteness is just a direct reflection of poor blood flow to the capillary bed right under the nail. It's like blanching, not enough blood getting there to give it the normal pinkish color.
Mm-hmm.
And the loss of the lunula is seen as another sign reinforcing that poor circulation, maybe also connected to certain protein deficiencies, which again could link back to liver function. It's basically showing that the vascular system isn't adequately nourishing those very furthest points, right down to the nail matrix. So we've seen all these potential signs in the feet and legs, these tea leaves reflecting liver health. Now, we really need to zoom out and connect this to the bigger picture. We have to understand what's causing the liver to get stressed enough to trigger all these downstream effects in the first place.
Right. What are the root causes?
The sources clearly lay out 6 key factors, 6 major stressors on the liver. If we connect this to the bigger picture, these are the things to really pay attention to.
Okay, let's go through them. The first one is maybe a bit uncomfortable because it's often things prescribed to help us. Medications.
Yes, medications are consistently flagged as a really significant source of liver stress. You have to remember, pretty much every drug, whether it's prescription or even over-the-counter stuff like pain relievers,
It all has to be processed by the liver.
every single bit. The liver is the body's chemical processing plant. It has to metabolize, break down, and detoxify all these substances. And this constant workload, especially dealing with compounds the body doesn't naturally encounter, puts a huge cumulative metabolic burden on the liver cells.
Just wears it out over time.
It can. Side effects are common, and hepatotoxicity, actual liver damage from drugs, is a well-known issue. It's just the relentless burden of processing foreign chemicals.
Okay, that's a big one. Next on the list takes us straight to diet. Sugar. And the source singled out one type in particular.
Yes, sugar in general is problematic, but the source really highlights high fructose corn syrup, HFCS, as being exceptionally hard on the liver.
Why HFCS specifically? What's the difference?
It's about how it's metabolized. Glucose, the other main simple sugar, can be used by pretty much every cell in your body for energy. Fructose, however, is different. It has to be processed almost entirely by the liver.
So it goes straight to the liver, no detours.
Pretty much. And when you consume large amounts of fructose, especially from HFCS, which is everywhere in processed foods and drinks, it just floods the liver. The liver gets overwhelmed and basically has no choice but to convert that excess fructose into fat.
Directly making fat in the liver itself.
Directly. This process is a primary driver of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD, which is just rampant globally now. And NANFLD is often the first step towards the more serious liver issues we've been discussing. So it's not just sugar is bad, it's that fructose, particularly in HFCS form, forces the liver into fat storage mode.
Oh, okay, that's a crucial distinction. Now, still on diet, the sources were critical of relying too much on processed and, interestingly, cooked foods.
Yeah, this point is about the quality and the vitality of the food, maybe. The source emphasizes that a diet mostly made up of heavily cooked foods, canned foods, which are often pasteurized, or just generally processed stuff, especially if it lacks anything raw, is really tough on both the liver and the kidneys.
Why is the lack of raw food such a big deal for the liver?
It comes down to two key things missing: enzymes and antioxidants.
Okay.
If you're eating a lot of processed junk and not many vegetables, especially raw ones, the source says your body gets no enzymes and no antioxidants. Living foods, particularly raw vegetables and fruits, contain natural enzymes that actually help with their own digestion, easing the burden on your body, including the liver.
So raw food helps digest itself, lightening the load.
To some extent, yes. And even more importantly, raw plant foods are packed with antioxidants. These are absolutely vital for protecting the liver cells. The liver's detoxification process itself, especially phase I detox, actually generates a lot of free radicals, unstable molecules that can damage cells.
So detoxing creates its own toxic byproducts.
In a way, yes. And antioxidants from your food, especially from colorful raw vegetables, are what the liver uses to neutralize those free radicals and protect itself from damage during the process.
Wow. So a diet heavy in cooked processed food means the liver has to work harder to digest and it lacks the protective antioxidants it needs to handle the detox process safely. That's a double whammy.
Exactly. Which leads directly into the next point. Simply not eating enough vegetables, combined with eating junk food. It's the lack of those protective elements again.
Makes sense. Okay, number 5 on the list is probably the most well-known liver stressor: alcohol.
Yes, the source just states this simply as a given. Excessive alcohol consumption is perhaps the most famous liver toxin,
Why is it so bad?
because the liver has to prioritize metabolizing alcohol above almost everything else. It drops other tasks to deal with the alcohol, and the process of breaking down alcohol generates some really toxic byproducts, like acetaldehyde, which directly damages liver cells. There's no mystery there, it's just hard on the organ.
Okay. And the final stressor mentioned might surprise some people, especially those really focused on fitness and muscle building: excessive protein.
Yeah, this one needs a bit of nuance. Protein is essential, obviously, but the issue is consuming massive amounts consistently over a long period.
More than the body actually needs for repair and maintenance.
Way more. When you break down protein, the metabolic byproduct is nitrogen waste, primarily in the form of ammonia, which is toxic.
Right.
It's the liver's job to take that toxic ammonia and convert it into a much less harmful substance called urea through a process called the urea cycle. Then the kidneys can safely filter out the urea and excrete it in urine.
Okay, so the liver cleans up the protein waste.
Yes, but if you're constantly flooding the system with huge amounts of excess protein, you're forcing the liver, and subsequently the kidneys, to work overtime processing all that nitrogen waste. Over time, this massive unnecessary load can put significant chronic stress on both organs, potentially overwhelming their capacity.
So it's the cumulative burden of dealing with the waste from very high protein intake.
That's the mechanism described.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding these causes, meds, HFCS, processed cooked food, lack of veg, alcohol, excess protein, leads directly to a really important practical point the sources make. It's about applying this knowledge if you already have some liver or kidney issues. If someone listening knows their liver or kidney function is compromised, the advice from the source is immediate and maybe counterintuitive to some popular diet trends.
Like high protein diets.
Exactly. The strategy has to be about reducing the load. The source explicitly advises going lower on protein intake, not zero, but lower, and significantly higher on nutrient-dense, antioxidant-rich vegetables, especially raw ones. The goal is to take the stress off those struggling organs and give them the resources to potentially recover.
Okay, so we've covered the symptoms, the why behind them, and the major things that stress the liver out. Now let's look at the positive side, the path forward. What actionable steps, what specific dietary approaches do the sources recommend to actually support the liver, maybe even help it heal?
Well, the absolute foundation, the non-negotiable starting point, according to the source material, is boosting that vegetable intake
Yeah,
massively
we keep coming back to vegetables.
because they're that crucial. It's about getting those enzymes, those antioxidants, the fiber, the phytonutrients, all the things the liver desperately needs to function well and protect itself, especially when it's under stress or trying to detoxify.
So, practically speaking, if someone's maybe having, say, 2 servings of vegetables a day now, the recommendation is to seriously ramp that up.
Dramatically, yes.
Yeah.
The thinking is the more varied, colorful, especially raw vegetables you can get in, the better you're supporting your liver's natural processes.
Yeah.
But beyond just eat more vegetables, the source does recommend a more specific, combined nutritional strategy.
Okay.
It suggests a combination of two particular eating patterns used together can be therapeutically very helpful for liver recovery.
And that combination is?
A healthy ketogenic diet paired with intermittent fasting.
Interesting combination. Let's break that down. Why keto first? A healthy version, presumably meaning not just bacon and butter, but lots of those veggies we just talked about.
Exactly. A well-formulated healthy keto diet drastically reduces your intake of carbohydrates and therefore glucose. By doing that, you significantly lessen the amount of sugar the liver has to process.
You take away its main burden, especially the fructose part driving fatty liver.
Precisely. You shift the body's primary fuel source away from sugar and towards using healthy fats instead. This stops forcing the liver to constantly deal with glucose and fructose overload, which helps reduce fat accumulation in the liver. You're essentially encouraging the body to burn fat, including potentially the fat stored in the liver, rather than constantly storing more from sugar.
Okay, so keto helps by changing the fuel source, taking the pressure off the liver's sugar processing pathways. Then what about adding intermittent fasting? How does restricting the timing of eating help the liver specifically?
Intermittent fasting gives your entire digestive system, including the liver, a regular extended break, a rest period. Now, during that fasting window, whether it's 14, 16, 18 hours, whatever someone chooses the liver, isn't constantly bombarded with incoming food, dealing with the hormonal responses to eating, processing nutrients, filtering potential toxins from meals.
It gets a chance to catch its breath.
It does. And more than that, it can switch its resources away from those immediate digestive and filtering tasks towards internal housekeeping, cellular repair, cleanup processes. There's a specific process called autophagy, where cells basically recycle old, damaged parts. Fasting is known to promote autophagy.
So it's not just resting, it's actively repairing during the fast.
That's the idea. Giving the system that regular downtime is seen as profoundly therapeutic. It reduces the sheer volume of work the liver has to do, 247 in our modern constant eating culture.
So the synergy makes sense. Keto changes the type of fuel to be less burdensome, and fasting provides the time for rest and repair.
It's presented as a powerful two-pronged strategy. Healthy fats, loads of vegetables within the keto framework, and then defined eating windows through intermittent fasting. The sources recommend this combination specifically to support liver health and help shift the system away from that reliance on the high-sugar processed foods that seem to cause so much of the initial congestion. Hashtag tag outro.
So what does this all mean? We've really gone from the big picture of systemic health right down to, well, your toenails and cracked heels. It really highlights how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? Your body is constantly sending signals.
Absolutely. The symptoms might look localized, but the root causes we've discussed are often deeply systemic.
And synthesizing this whole deep dive, some of those connections were genuinely surprising, real aha moments, I think.
Definitely. For me, the idea that spider veins or varicose veins might actually be reflecting an estrogen overload due to poor liver clearance.
Mm-hmm.
That completely reframes how you might think about them. It's not just gravity.
Right. Or realizing that those annoying cracked heels might not just be dry skin, but could actually trace back to the liver not making enough bile to let you absorb essential fats like omega-3s.
That's a huge one. And practically, the point about foot pain, that persistent ache you assumed was plantar fasciitis, could potentially be systemic inflammation stemming from a congested liver.
Yeah.
That changes everything about how you might seek relief. You wouldn't just focus on the foot anymore.
No, you'd have to look upstream, wouldn't you? Look at the diet, the liver's filtering capacity, the overall metabolic stress.
Exactly. And that loops us right back to that crucial point. If the liver's struggling, its partners, the kidneys, the colon, are likely struggling too. You can't isolate one organ.
This whole exploration just hammers home that congestion in one area, even if the symptom seems minor, like a bit of toenail fungus or dry heels, it really suggests the whole system needs support.
It points towards a need for systemic balancing.
So the final question for you listening has to be this. Thinking about those 6 key stressors we outlined, the meds, the high fructose corn syrup, the processed foods, lack of veggies, alcohol, maybe even excessive protein, what's one small change you could realistically make starting today?
Could you swap out that sugary drink for water? Could you consciously add an extra serving of raw vegetables to your dinner? Maybe try pushing breakfast back an hour to create a slightly longer overnight fast.
Just one thing, based on what we've discussed, that could start to shift that systemic balance, reduce that chronic stress load on your body's amazing but overworked filtration system.
A small change can make a big difference over time.
A truly fascinating look at how listening to your body, right down to your toes, might be one of the smartest health strategies you have. We hope this deep dive gave you some clarity and maybe some motivation for those small, powerful shifts.